But yeah, we should get into the big news of the day. And first up, there's plenty to talk AEW when it comes to pay-per-views, especially both here and abroad, as there's been various news notes over this week, and it has been confirmed this week. A little bit of information about All In as well, as far as the pay-per-view goes, and it might well tie into this. There's Warner Brothers, apparently, one of us Discovery, reportedly in favor of significantly expanding AEW's pay-per-view schedule. Apparently, this is coming from Fightful. Warner Brothers Discovery sources confirmed to Fightful Select that one of the major proposals of their end for the AEW agreement, especially for the extension, was the subject of pay-per-view. Specifically, a WBD source telling Fightful that they mentioned it's very likely the possibility of significantly expanding the AEW pay-per-view schedule, even to one a month. Apparently, this is a change that WBD have been wanting for a while, which does beg the question a little bit. It's like, okay, so where are these pay-per-views going if users are so invested? Like, that's the first place your mind goes, as our friends at WrestlePurist have written up. Could it be part of a streaming deal with Max? Could it be something to do with Bleacher Report? And I think this second story maybe ties in a little bit, as there we are, straight from the source as far as Fightful goes. AEW All In is apparently going to be airing on Bleacher Report. So it's Andrew Zarian that Fightful are collating this from, of the Mat Men podcast, who's always reliable when it comes to TV information and information from people like that side of things, saying that there might be some kind of bundle package with All In and All Out, as they're taking place on back-to-back weekends. In the past, AEW events have aired for $50 each on Bleacher Report, and that is looking to be the home for this pay-per-view. So I think those two stories are kind of a little bit combined there, JP. Like, what do you make of that? I was convinced that there was going to be some kind of, not HBO, Max, tie-in with All In. I didn't think there was any world where AEW were going to be trying to sell pay-per-views on back-to-back weekends. But with that story about them expanding the calendar, and now with this, seems like that might actually be the case. Ballsy move.
It's a very ballsy move. You think about it as well, about, are these bundles going to work? And you wonder, do you cannibalize your market? 2 in 2 weeks, 2 in 2 months is a ask. Seriously, UFC, but 2 in 2 weeks, that seems kind of mad to me, I have to say. But I think when thinking of the reasons about why do they want to expand the pay-per-view schedule, and it's like, I imagine they look at it as how, like, they're looking at Peacock and they're thinking, okay, so they're doing better numbers, they're doing bigger numbers in front of bigger audiences potentially. They've started to, and you saw it with the Bud Light adverts in particular at Money in the Bank and stuff. They're starting to basically brand and have sponsors for individual matches. So there is a potential kind of cash cow there. The problem is where they're going to be running these, because they'll have to run a few in the UK because they're not hot live at the minute, and they've got a lot of content out there, and this is more content. And you're going to need bigger writing teams. And I'm not convinced that AEW has the infrastructure to be able to cope with doing a pay-per-view schedule like this. They've got a Ring of Honor show coming up next week, and there's nothing announced for that, because obviously another story will come onto the main event's not happening. So
you went from having one thing announced to that to having nothing announced to that now.
Exactly. And I think it going on to Max, I could kind of understand. It'd be that, for me, would be the kind of bigger move and ties in other areas as well that the Warner Brothers Discovery can say. Because obviously the story has been for this week that, saw that Fightful had also reported that they are getting pretty close to a deal on this, and that there is going to be a long-term announcement. I'm now kind of wondering if that's going to be announced at All In or something like that, or could save it for All Out. But the relationship is there. I just think Warner Brothers Discovery might just be thinking, okay, this is a way of making money, and they're just going to do it, and they're just going to try and rinse it. And AEW isn't established enough to kind of fall into that trap. Now, when WCW did it, for a while, creatively it was fine, because they also had a very deep roster, rather like AEW do. But the booking, you're asking a lot there, and you've got to divide tasks up, and I don't know if they're going to be able to do it.
Interesting to hear you say that, because I'm really split on it. I think for me, the idea of going with more pay-per-views. The biggest negative for me, just as a fan, is like, oh, yes, it'll be more pay-per-views, and that sounds fun. It's a bit like, remember that argument when I hate to bring them up, but Progress had like 15 matches on a show, and people were like, why are you complaining? You're getting more for your money. And it was like, right, but like, there's other considerations there.
Yeah.
And with this, there's that part of the argument, and there's also the part of the argument, though. It's like, I like the AW pay-per-views are special. There's 4, 5 a year now, plus the ROH stuff. And it's like when an AW pay-per-view comes around, it's really special and important. And, while, we have partnerships with Fight and whatever, and we don't always have to pay for the shows. I never mind paying for the shows, where if and when we kind of have to, because it's like, okay, it's only every now and then, and it feels like a big deal. I think bastardizing that and going 12 times a year, I think, we're not saying it's definitely 12, but, closer to that, I think you've got diminishing returns. So that's the biggest negative for me. I actually don't think there's a negative from a booking point of view. I think my take on it would be, and maybe it's just like, this isn't even a positive, but I just don't think Tony Khan's very good at booking, with long stretches between pay-per-views. And this shouldn't be a solution to that problem, because we have loads of periods, don't we, where there's that dead period where it's like, fuck, we're 8 weeks away from a pay-per-view and MJF's got to drag this feud out, or we don't even know what's going on. We've got this dead-end feud going on because we know it's like a break between the pay-per-views. I just don't think Tony Khan's built in a way that he can actually properly book between 4 or 5 pay-per-views a year. I think we have so many down periods in AEW that his booking style probably suits monthly pay-per-views a bit more. I think having that target at the end of a 4 or 5 week cycle, or if it's a 6-week cycle or whatever it is, I think that might be better for him, because I think it's like so many times people disappear off TV. You couldn't do that because all your important people have got to be on the pay-per-view. So he'd have to have them on telly in those 4 weeks. He'd have to not lose his toys that he's got down the back. And it, in a way, maybe I'm being too positive on that, but it might make him a little bit more disciplined as a booker just by necessity. Can you see any positives there?
I can see the argument, absolutely, and I agree generally that if he has too much time to think, that's where the kind of lulls come in, and we're in the middle of a lull, aren't we? We're not having anything. It doesn't feel like we're that close having anything really announced for All In. Like we're maybe like after Blood and Guts, basically. At that stage, it feels like we're there. So
and they do that, don't they? Tentpole TV to break it up. Like, it's like TNA did it back in the day, didn't they? When they stopped doing the monthly pay-per-views, they were like, okay, we'll have TV specials, and they never have the discipline. And I don't think he does either.
It's just that if they do it properly, like, and this is the thing, they'd have to go for a year, which then leads on to another story about them changing kind of moveset stuff, so they're able to kind of book long term in advance. If they had it all planned out and they said, okay, this pay-per-view is going to feature these people, this pay-per-view is going to feature these people, rather than it being the same people who are going to feel they're going to be on there because they need to put their draws on there, it becomes like special TV with like very high level wrestling. They could get away with it. I don't know. Tony can't resist temptation at times.
I know. I'm talking an ideal world a lot, aren't I? Like, because the other positive for me, Platt says here, a couple people saying 6 to 8 will be fine, maybe not 12. Because that is a good point, as Chris Elliott says.
Yeah,
dude, they don't even themselves really do 12 a year anymore, So yeah, maybe something more like that, 6 to 8. I could see improvements by doing that. I think they're running a lot more TV. And yes, it's more product. So again, it's a counterintuitive solution to the problem. But I think they're running too much TV to have the pay-per-views that scarce. Pay-per-views are going to become 10-hour shows. If Collision and Dynamite are really a Raw and SmackDown, we're going to have a lot of programs going on at once. Maybe it could stand to be like, maybe the happy medium is that maybe we don't have 5, we have 6, or we have 7, or we have 8. Maybe there's a tipping point there, but maybe there's something that's, because the other thing from this as well, it's the money side of it. Because these same arguments would have been had about, like, remember, like, when WWF started doing In Your House, and they did pretty well, even though they were low budget pay per views. And then one day they were like, fuck it, we're going to make them full blown pay per views. And they made fucking loads of money. And, like, that's the conversation AW probably got to have internally, is like, well, if we turn it from 5 to 8, yes, we're not going to do the same 135,000 bars we might have last year. But if we do 100, and there's an extra 100 and another extra 100 on top of that, and the maths work out, there's a tipping point there as well, isn't there? Because I think we would think, when you look at those, those WWE or AEW pay-per-view prices in America, as Brits paying £20 on Fight, we're kind of cringing at the idea of paying another £20. The idea that the Americans will put their hands in their pockets more often, or even with the all in, all out situation in back-to-back weeks, seems foreign and impossible to us. But is history not proven that they probably will pay when they want to see this stuff?
It, you know, Impact do monthly kind of specials in that sense. I'm not like against the kind of idea of it, I suppose. It's just that Warner Brothers Discovery, this is going to be, I imagine, part of the TV deal. Is there's obviously a certain degree of, how are they going to be doing this? Is it all going to be on Bleacher Report? Effectively, they're going to be bringing it entirely in house for it, because that then makes me wonder that Bleacher Report hasn't got the best reputation. So, like, that's a risk in and of itself for the US. I think for the UK, we haven't mentioned this about this. It doesn't then it makes me worry about it being on ITV. Like, that's the thing I kind of wanted to think about for that, about whether All In is now going to be actually on ITV, or are they going to look to put it on pay-per-view? Is it going to be linked in with TNT Sports? But then with BT Sports, I imagine WWE have an exclusivity contract or anything along those lines. But then the rumor is that they might be going out that deal anyway because Sky want them back. And, there's interesting kind of developments on that front. But yeah, it's a hell of a game. It feels like we're getting to the point where AEW as a company are going to be absolutely financially secure with all of this stuff. Like, they're going to be making millions. Like, you look at the UFC model, they make a fortune from it because they've sold those pay-per-views. They've got them all in-house. If you've got Warner Brothers Discovery spending that much money, you would like to think they're going to be pushing this really, really hard across all of their platforms. Everything.
Their point of view is going to be, look at the numbers, because that was a big thing Meltzer had in the Observer. This only come out an hour ago, but it's like, look at we cry about like Dynamite and they've only done 800,000 this week, or the demos or whatever. Like, Meltzer putting in perspective, being like, well, yeah, that was the second highest sports program on TV this week. Guess what? The number one was WWE SmackDown or Raw. I can't remember which of the two it was, but it's like, like you got to kind of put these things into context. I think somebody sat in a suit in a boardroom working for Warner, thinking about all the money they're going to be giving AEW, like you say, is just going to look at that black and white and go, well, hang on, you sold 135,000 pay-per-views. Why aren't we doing this more often? And I think that's going to be the push. And yeah, maybe they'll know that might hurt things slightly, but is it worth, the pain? And on the British side of things, yeah, it is getting a bit close, isn't it now? We've got we're very, very close to the show now, less than pretty much 6 weeks away. No ITV announcements. I don't think they could get away with putting it on pay-per-view over here, because, like, how many would they sell in a normal month? And then, 80,000 of us are going to be in that stadium. Are we not the 80,000 people we would pay? You know what I mean? Like, genuinely, practically, exactly. Would it actually sell many more than that anyway? It's probably not worth it, is it? So you probably do need to find a home. It'll end up being Fight, like everything else ends up being probably over here, if it's not going to be ITV. I can't see it like being a full pay-per-view or anything like that.
Then that's enormous missed opportunity. Because if they're expanding their pay-per-view schedule, you'd like to think that the UK is getting one big one a year, at least, possibly two, depending on attendance. Because this is a crowd where them running the O2 or the Echo Arena, I know it's called something else these days as well, but they're going to be doing sold-out numbers for those for the next couple of years. So that's going to be part of it. But you need ITV for that longer-term exposure. Like, you need that. You've got them as a partner. Use them. ITV4, like, that's where it is. I mean, if it's good enough for the Tour de France, I'm sure they can accept being onto that. ITV was never going to happen realistically on a Sunday. Pay-per-view it's going to isolate people. They don't know the product, and then they're being asked to pay for it again. Other than that, and it's just like, you've got this chance in front of what is going to be a mass. Like, saying it now, predicting it's still like the biggest, the highest, properly attended show with paid people there over the fucking phrases.
Well, Meltzer's got it at 5th right now, but, like, I mean, he's counting North Korea and some show that happened with Londos 4,000 years ago.
Sorry, those lads in Greece were just walking in off the street. They weren't paying shit. Yeah.
It is absolutely going to be maybe not the highest paid attendance, but the highest attendance at a paid show, which is kind of Meltzer's new maths right now. It will be. It's going to pass the 80,000. So we're at 75,000 already, even if, there's comps in there. there's going to be 5,000 more, isn't there? But yeah, absolutely, that's the thing. That's where we're up to with that anyway. Yeah, I guess we'll keep an eye on it. I am waiting with bated breath for that ITV news for All In, but yeah, it's not coming anytime soon. But in a related story,